He was the undefeated king of knockout victories, a young champion who believed tradition was a thing of the past.
In the heart of Seoul, an undefeated Taekwondo champion made the biggest mistake of his career. He mocked the old masters and publicly challenged a quiet legend in retirement. He expected a publicity stunt. What he got was a life-changing lesson in humility. In the shimmering center of Seoul's Global Combat Expo arena, a bold young Taekwondo champion was on the verge of committing the worst blunder of his unbeaten career. What was initially a cheeky challenge to the tradition of the martial arts became hazardously serious when Emma living legend Chuck Norris emerged from retirement and into the arena. Jinho Park was not your average social media sensation. For 4 years, he was a Taekwondo phenomenon, the Lightning, with 15 straight knockouts written, a name for humiliating vanquished foes. Brought up as an orphan in Bison, he'd become a worldwide legend by making tradition spectacle. When Jinho jeered at the old masters and challenged Chuck Norris to battle in joke about dinosaurs in retirement centers, he had no concept he was calling upon. A 6-time undefeated world karate champion who once fought 6 years without losing a single point. Norris answered not with words, but with accuracy. A measured step into the ring sent a reckoning for the crowd, and Jinho never to be expected. A publicity stunt that started would become a crucible of humility. The only martial arts arena and Jinho's reputation would never be the same after going head-to-head against a master who fought not with his fists. He instructed, "Before we get back at it, let us know where you're listening from, and if today's story touches your heart, you make sure you are subscribed because tomorrow I have something special set aside for you." A savage kick reverberated through the arena and the fighter fell hard to the mat. The audience gasped as the referee plunged in, testing whether or not the man was even able to move. But Jinho Park was already strutting around with arms raised. High, smiles spread wide. He strode past the cameras, leaned over his man, and yelled insults, loud, cocky, unapologetic. The Global Combat Expo arena in Seoul sparkled like a space-age temple, its towering glass roof reflecting hundreds of phone screens filming every second, screens bigger than billboards shown. Jinho's winning in slow motion from all sides, the perfect revolving hook kick which had knocked out his opponent. Some fans screamed with delight. Others shared uncomfortable glances. That's 15 consecutive victories, 15 knockouts for Lightning. Jinho Arc, Kenji Tanaka's voice thundered across the arena speakers. The veteran commentator wiped his glasses, face carefully expressionless, a thrilling finish to be sure, but possibly lacking the restraint one would wish to see in a demonstration intended to celebrate martial arts tradition. Jinho didn't care about restraint. He was 26 years old and the public face of new Taekwondo. Not the restrained Olympic sport, but the flashy social media-ready one that garnered millions of hits. Tonight's Global Combat Expo, built as a testimonial to martial arts' international heritage, had been his own highlight reel. Mina Lee, Jinho's manager, stood outside the ring, her face a practiced mask of enthusiasm, no matter the knot that began to tighten in her belly. She'd created Jinho's brand out of nothing, the Bison orphan who fought his way to global renown. But recently, she could hardly see the modest warrior she found 4 years ago. "Another one down!" Jinho yelled, grabbing the mic from the ring announcer. Perspiration dripped on his chiseled physique as he strode the mat, lapping up the crowds. "Reaction! Is there nobody who can challenge me? Nobody at all?" Mina flinched. That was not part of the plan. The expo was meant to be one of respect, an opportunity to bond with sponsors who respected heritage, but Jinho was on adrenaline and ego. "You know what is wrong with martial arts today?" Jinho went on, voice ringing out in the arena. "Too much bowing, too much philosophy, too little reality." He twirled around in a circle, posing for the cameras. All these old masters sneaking around, in their dojos, instructing the same dull techniques from a century ago. In the VIP area, some of the older masters shifted uneasily. Among them sat a harumphing man in his 70s, Master Juan Chinho's initial instructor. His gaze never wavered from his old pupil, his face impassive. Kenji Tanaka cleared his throat, trying to distract. Jinho Park, gentlemen and ladies, with his own special presence here tonight. I dare any of them. Chinho cut in, gesturing toward the guests of honor. Any old-school fighter who believes their old ways remain effective. Step forward. Let's see what your tradition is compared to my reality. The reaction of the crowd divided. Younger fans screaming, others losing their voices. Mina took a step closer to the ring, slicing her hand across her throat. Enough, her eyes implored. Jinho noticed, turned a blind eye. Really? He went on, looking with gleam of mischief in his eyes. I have an exclusive invite. They say Chuck Norris is the world's greatest karate champion. He made air quotes around world's greatest. 6 world titles back in the good old days when dinosaurs roamed the earth. Nervous chuckles spread through the audience. Even those who did not practice martial arts knew Chuck Norris, the action hero, the internet meme, the legend. Well, Mr. Norris, if you're watching this from your retirement village, Jinho's smile grew larger. I'd be delighted to demonstrate how real fighting has changed since your time. No offense, but facts are facts. Your time couldn't possibly manage what we do today. Mina closed her eyes for a moment. This was crossing a line. Chuck Norris was now in his mid-80s, well out of competition and out of movies. Even as a publicity stunt, this was too much. Jinho reveled in the divided reaction, feeding off cheers and awkward silence. Anyone else think I'm being unfair? He asked, spinning again. Perhaps I should go after someone my own age. Sorry, but greatness doesn't make excuses. If your style is so perfect, prove it works against me. Kenji Tanaka leaned into his microphone, his voice softer now, almost reverent. Interesting timing for such a challenge. Many viewers may not know that Chuck Norris is actually a commotion at the back of the arena interrupted him. Heads turned. Whispers spread like wildfire. Jinho, still riding high on his moment, didn't notice immediately. He just kept walking, gesturing at his undefeated record on the large screen. 15-0, 15 knockouts. Who's next? Who wants it? The rumble of the crowd grew louder. Phone cameras panned away from Jinho towards the doorway. Jinho ceased walking eventually, frustrated at being upstaged. What is everyone staring at? Then he saw it too. At the main entrance, a pocket of space had opened around a single person. An older gentleman with a well-groomed beard in plain black slacks and a dark blue fitted button-down shirt. Nothing ostentatious, no entourage. Just quiet authority. Even at a distance, the man's stance demanded respect. Shoulders straight but not tense, hands loose at his sides, face calm and concentrated. Is that? Shinho shielded his eyes against the lights. Kenji Tanaka's voice came back, shaking slightly. Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we have a surprise visitor this evening. If I'm not mistaken, and I've had the privilege of encountering him once a long time ago, that is actually Chuck Norris. The arena broke into stunned whispers, not only because Chuck Norris had shown up, but because of timing, as if Jinho had called him out from nowhere. Impossible, Jinho grumbled, but the mic picked it up anyway. Mina held onto the lip of the ring. Wide eyes. You had to nudge it, she breathed. On the massive screens, camera zoomed in tight on Chuck Norris's face. At 85, the creases of age were visible, but so was the unmistakable hardness in his jaw, the clarity in his eyes. He didn't make a dramatic move, no over-the-top reaction to being seen. He just stood there, eyes fixed on the ring. For our younger readers, Kenji went on, voice back into its professional stride, Chuck Norris is not simply a movie actor or online meme. Prior to Hollywood, he was an undefeated six-time world karate champion. He transformed Western martial arts, established his own system known as Chungku, and taught innumerable champions. The crowd parted to make way for Chuck as he walked towards the ring. No rush, no drama, just careful steps. Jingho's arrogant smile wavered for one instant before coming back twice as big. Well, look at that, the legend himself. He bounced up on his toes, playing to the crowd once again. Didn't think you were going to show up, sir. Chuck didn't answer, didn't hurry, just kept right on going with his careful pace. Mina bolted around to the steps, intercepting him before he could make it to the ring. "Mr. Norris," she added hurriedly, "I apologize for my fighter's manners. This wasn't deliberate. You don't have to." Chuck Norris locked eyes with her with unexpected kindness. His voice, when he spoke, was gentle but firm. No apology necessary. "Young lady, I came to observe the demonstration. Now it appears I'm part of it." Mina blinked, searching for words. "But you're 85? "Yes." The corner of his mouth quirked upward slightly. "I'm aware." Jingho leaned on the ropes, shouting down. "Seriously, Mr. Norris, no offense, just getting the crowd going. You know how it is. You don't necessarily have to." Chuck's attention turned to Gino, silencing him mid-sentence. Not out of anger or bluster, but simply focus. "Young man," Chuck said, voice carrying despite its softness, "you challenge traditional martial arts." "I accept." The arena became utterly still. In the VIP area, Master Juan stood, eyes never leaving the drama playing out below. Jingho's face cycled through emotions: surprise, amusement, confusion, and then, fleetingly, something like concern, before lurching back into confident swagger. "Come on, this is ridiculous. I was just—" "If you didn't mean it," Chuck replied bluntly, "you shouldn't have said it." The cameras recorded every second, transmitting Jingho's unease onto the huge screens. He was stuck with his own words, with the judging world, with the dignified silence of the legend in front of him. Kenji Tanaka's voice came back, now soft with awe. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are making martial arts history tonight." A challenge has been issued and accepted across different generations. Jingho glanced at Mina for assistance, but her face provided nothing. This was his problem to solve. He made a forced laugh. "Look, I admire what you get in your day, but this is 2025, not 1975. I'm in my prime, and you're doing excuses?" Chuck asked with a bland air. "That doesn't sound like a champion." The crowd gave an "oh" in unison. Jingho's expression darkened. Cornered, he doubled up and did what he always did. "Fine, if that's what you'd like to do." He faced the crowd, arms open. "You heard it here first. The legend himself wants to get into the ring. Who am I to deny history?" The crowd's response was one of mixed excitement, astonishment, and in some corners, blatant discomfort. This was not a level playing field. It could not be. But as Chuck Norris ascended the steps to the ring with smooth ease that defied his age, an odd tension permeated the arena. History was certainly being made, though perhaps not the sort that Gino had been hoping for. The young champion had issued a call-out, a legend, never looking to receive an answer. Now the answer stood before him, serene and unflappable, and all Jingho include wondered if they'd overestimated precisely what Chuck Norris was still capable of. Chuck Norris waited at the ring's edge, hands loose at his sides, staring at Jingho with unblinking intensity. No entourage swooped in to assist him. No show music sounded. Nothing declared his arrival except his silent presence, and that was sufficient. "This is crazy," Jingho grumbled. But the arena is so quiet his words reached everywhere. He bobbed up and down on his toes, fighting to regain his previous confidence. "I can't compete with a senior citizen, even if he's Chuck Norris." Chuck took off his watch and gave it to Mina while keeping his eyes fixed on Jingho. "Age," he said matter-of-factly, "is just a number." Something in the tone, Not pride, not fury, but conviction rippled through the crowd. Kenji Tanaka's voice took over the momentary silence. If you're just coming in, we're seeing something special at the Global Combat Expo. Taekwondo World Champion Jinho Park made a public challenge to conventional martial artists, naming Chuck Norris specifically. And to the surprise of everyone, the 6-time world karate champion has emerged. The camera swept across the arena, catching the shocked faces of fans and fighters alike. Many headphones lifted, taping what could be the most viral martial arts moment of the last decades. Jinho's smirking smile resurfaced, though it didn't quite make it to his eyes. Look, Mr. Norris, I admire you, but this is madness. Perhaps we can stage a friendly demonstration instead. A little light sparring before the cameras. Chuck moved forward, entering the ring with an ease that appeared to quieten the arena even more. You challenge traditional martial arts, he said, speaking softly but audibly. Said we couldn't cope with what you do nowadays. He shrugged almost imperceptibly. Show me. Jinho laughed awkwardly, glancing around for backup. You're serious? You really want to? You chatter a lot? Chuck watched in silence. The plain remark hung there. No insult, no challenge, merely a comment. It cut more deeply somehow than any trash talk could. Jinho's face reddened. He looked over at Mina, who stood immobile at ringside, then at officials hovering uncertainly on the edge. This wasn't an approved match. This wasn't arranged. This was fast becoming something they had not been trained for. I can't be held accountable, for Jinho started. Your words, Shock cut in softly. Be held accountable for those first. In the broadcast booth, Kenji Tanaka bent into his microphone, voice barely above a whisper with respect. What we're witnessing, ladies and gentlemen, is not a conflict between fighters, but between eras, between philosophies. He hesitated. I got to fight Chuck Norris in 1970. I lasted just less than 2 minutes, but in those seconds, I experienced what it means to be a master. Arena officials clustered on the ground, not knowing what to do. The event director rushed to Mina, waving his hands wildly. It's not sanctioned, the director spat. We cannot permit it. Mina observed Chuck and Jinho, watching the collision course. Do you want to be the one to say no to Chuck Norris? She whispered. The director paled. Waivers, insurance. I'll take total responsibility, a new voice cut in. Master Juan had come down from the VIP area, his weathered face serious. Let them fight. Jinho's eyes flew wide at the sight of his old master. They had not spoken in 3 years, not since Jinho had spoken publicly of Master Juan's traditional Taekwondo being outmoded and unsellable. Master Horn, Jinho added, his voice changing suddenly, less confident. You can't possibly believe. You challenged all the traditional martial arts, Master Juan replied, eyes unyielding. That includes me. That includes everything I taught you. He glanced at Chuck, slightly in his debt. The prestige of watching you fight once more, Nestor Norris, would be worth whatever comes afterward. Chuck returned the bow in kind. Heeper subsequently required for the brief encounter, a signal that said a lot to the ancient martial artists in attendance. Jinho was trapped in his own deceit. Cameras rolled. Millions witnessed on the web. His image, his reputation, his carefully crafted brand dangled in the balance. So did Mina's. She moved forward. 5 minutes, she declared loudly. Light contact only, exhibition rules. The event director threw up his hands but didn't protest further. 5 minutes, Chuck nodded in agreement. Jinho gulped hard, but pride compelled a smirk. Sure. 5 minutes? I'll take it easy on the legend. The remark lacked punch amidst the tense environment. As ring officials hurriedly set up the ring, Kenji's commentary explained things to viewers. Chuck Norris transformed karate in the Western world during the 1960s and 70s. He developed his fighting technique by blending classic karate with creativity that made him all but invincible. While a household name to millions as an action hero, martial artists recall him as arguably the greatest karate champion in history. Jinho backed into his corner where Mina stood with water bottle and angry whisper. "What in the world were you thinking?" she growled, addressing him by name. "Are you crazy?" Jinho took a sip of water, eyes never wavering from Chuck. "Chill out. He's old. I'll spar with him for a few minutes. Show some respect. Let him get a couple of light punches in for the cameras. It'll go viral. Win-win. You just don't get it." Mina shook her head. "Look at that man, standing alone across the ring, eyes closed, breathing rhythmically. No stretching, no warm-up drill, no display for the cameras. Just stillness, focus, being there. He's been training day and night ever since you were still in your mother's womb," Mina went on. "He's not here for your social media highlight." Jinho shrugged his shoulders, annoyance crossing his face. What can he do? He's 85, Mina. Even if he was the greatest ever, everyone has a time. Telling and preparing this narrative took us hours. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means everything to me. Now let's get back to the story. Mina cast a look at Master Juan, who stood at the ring's perimeter with unwavering stare. "It is not about age," she murmured. "It is about something you have forgotten." Before Jinho could protest, the timekeeper raised 1 minute to begin. Kenji Tanaka's voice grew with restrained enthusiasm. "Ladies and gentlemen, in moments, we will witness what might be Chuck Norris's first public martial arts demonstration in nearly 2 decades. Jinho Park, with his 15 consecutive knockout victories, faces a man who once went 6 years without losing a single point in competition." In the crowds, phones remained raised, but the earlier commotion had given way to an almost religious silence. Even Jinho's loudest defenders stood on their tiptoes in quiet suspense. The bell tolled. Jinho came to the center of the ring, attempting to regain his initial brashness. He went clockwise, bouncing nimbly, hands up in his characteristic open. Guard flashy, camera ready, more for show than practicality. Chuck didn't move much at all, barely a pivot of his stance. His defense was traditional, close in, economical movement, no unnecessary show. His gaze followed Jinho with unsettling consistency. There was a moment of frozen stillness between the two men. "Come on, Mr. Norris," Jinho shouted, shattering the tension with pretended daring. "Don't be coy. Let us see those world-famous kicks." Chuck did not respond to the insult, did not blink, merely observed, measured, waited. Jinho flailed left, then right, probing. Chuck's guard moved minimally, only sufficient to keep him in perfect defensive stance. No reaction, no expended energy. Frustration danced across Jinho's face. He was accustomed to foes who fought, who reacted to his jeering, who provided him with something to work against. Chuck's immobility unsettled me. "I guess I'll begin then," Jinho declared, and threw a lightning-quick front kick, his opening move, the one that had stumped many foes. Chuck didn't dodge theatrically. He simply didn't have space to be there when the kick came. A slight shift that caused Jinho's strike to miss by millimeters. Jinho blinked in shock, then regained with a spinning back kick. Again, Chuck shifted, just enough, no more, no less, to allow the kick to slice through thin air. The crowd grumbled. This wasn't the aging legend they'd anticipated. This was something else altogether. Jinho pushed forward with combination jab. Cross, roundhouse kick movements so rapid they blurring on television. Chuck parried the punches with economical precision and sidestepped the kick with a fraction of a degree bend of his upper body. No unnecessary motion, no flash, just perfect. Precise defense. Unbelievable. Kenji breathed into microphone. The timing. The speed. Chuck Norris is moving like a man a third his age. Jinho felt something he hadn't felt in years: uncertainty. Each attack was answered with the exact right defense, as if Chuck was reading his plans before he even moved. "Lucky!" Jinho growled loud enough for Chuck to hear. "Let's see how lucky you are with this." He launched into his most impressive sequence, a combination that had won him his last championship. Flying knee transitioning to spinning elbow, followed by a back kick movements designed for both damage and spectacle. Chuck waited until the last possible moment, then simply stepped offline. As Jinho's momentum carried him past, Chuck tapped him lightly on the shoulder. Not a strike, just a touch, a reminder. I could have countered. I chose not to. Jinho stumbled slightly, thrown off balance by missing so completely. He turned, face flushed with something between embarrassment and anger. "Stop playing around," he snapped. "Fight me for real." Chuck tilted his head slightly, the first change in his expression since entering the ring. "Is that what you want?" Something in his tone made Jinho hesitate. The cockiness slipped for a moment, revealing a glimpse of the reality beneath. Young fighter suddenly aware he might be out of his depth, but pride won out. Jinho nodded sharply. "Show me what made you a champion." Shock's eyes held Jinho's for a long mint, then he nodded once. "As you wish." In the hushed arena, even those without martial arts experience sensed the shift. Something fundamental had changed. Chuck moved, not explosively, not with the flashy speed of youth, but with something more profound. Perfect timing, perfect distance, perfect economy of motion. He stepped forward, closing distance with movements that seemed almost gentle until Jinho tried to defend against them. Jinho threw a jab. Chuck's parry was textbook, redirecting the energy rather than blocking it hard, using Jinho's own force against him. The young fighter found himself slightly off balance. Before he could recover, Chuck delivered a single straight punch knot. To Jinho's face, not with knockout power, but to his chest. Perfect form, perfect placement. Jinho stumbled back, more surprised than hurt. The punch hadn't been devastating, but it had landed clean through his guard, as if his defenses weren't, even there. "Just lucky," Jinho muttered again, but doubt had crept into his voice. He attacked again, more cautiously this time. High kick, feint, spinning back fist, his best techniques, executed flawlessly. Chuck's defense remained impenetrable. Where most fighters would back away from Jinho's onslaught, Chuck moved forward, always at the perfect angle to neutralize Jinho's advantages in height and reach. For the first time in years, Jinho found himself retreating. At the edge of the ring, Master Han watched intently, arms folded across his chest. His expression remained stern, but something like satisfaction flickered in his eyes. "What we're witnessing," Kenji Tanaka said softly into his microphone, "is the difference between technique and mastery, between athleticism and understanding. Chuck Norris isn't relying on speed or power at his age. He's demonstrating why he was unbeatable in his prime. Perfect positioning, perfect timing. The foundations that Jinho dismissed as outdated." The crowd watched in stunned silence as the dynamic continued to shift. Jinho Young, strong at the peak of his athletic powers, found himself increasingly defensive. Not because Chuck was overwhelming him with speed or power, but because every move the older man made seemed to arrive at exactly the right moment, from exactly the right angle. A minute passed. Then 2. Jinho's breathing grew heavier. Not from physical exhaustion, but from mounting frustration. Nothing was working. Nothing was landing. He felt like he was fighting a ghost there, but not there. Solid, but untouchable. "Stand still and fight!" Jinho finally shouted, frustration boiling over. Chuck's expression remained unchanged. "I am fighting," he said quietly. "You're just not seeing it." The simple statement stung worse than any insult. Jinho's face hardened. Enough playing around. He launched into his most aggressive sequence, the one that had knocked out his last 3 opponents. Chuck waited until the last moment and moved inside Jinho's guard with startling precision. No wild counter, no showy technique, just a simple, perfect side kick to the midsection. The impact wasn't brutal, but it was precise. Jinho felt the air leave his lungs in a rush. He stumbled backward, eyes wide with shock more than pain. The kick had landed clean through his best defense, not by overwhelming power, but by perfect timing and placement. For the first time, real doubt crept into Jinho's expression. Not just that he might not win this exhibition, but that perhaps everything he thought he knew about fighting needed reassessment. The timekeeper signaled 1 minute remaining. Jinho glanced at Mina, seeking guidance, but her expression offered nothing. This was his challenge, his lesson to learn. He turned back to Chuck, who waited calmly in the center of the ring, posture relaxed but ready. No gloating, no showboating, just quiet competence. In that moment, something shifted in Jinho's approach. The cocky grin faded. The performative, bouncing stopped. For perhaps the first time in years, he focused solely on the fight itself, not how it would look on camera. He moved forward more deliberately, guard tighter, more traditional. The basics he'd learned from Master Juan long ago before fame had changed his priorities. Chuck nodded slightly, acknowledging the shift. The final minute unfolded differently. Not a master, toying with an overconfident youth, but something closer to a genuine exchange between martial artists. Jinho attacked with more discipline, more focus. Chuck responded in kind, his movements precise but not dismissive. When the bell rang, neither man had dominated the final exchanges. But everyone watching knew what they'd witnessed. A young champion at the peak of his physical powers, tested by an aging master who had never stopped honing his craft. Jinho stood breathing heavily, not from exertion, but from the intensity of the experience. Across from him, Chuck's breathing remained steady, his posture unchanged. The arena erupted in applause, not the wild cheering of Jinho's earlier victory, but something deeper, more respectful. Even those who had come to see spectacle recognized they'd witnessed something more meaningful. Shock bowed, a proper traditional bow. After a moment's hesitation, Jinho returned it deeper than necessary, an unconscious acknowledgement. As they straightened, their eyes met. No words passed between them, but something was communicated nonetheless. Chuck turned and walked calmly toward the edge of the ring. No victory celebration, no playing to the crowd. His part was done. Jinho remained in the center, watching him go. A cocky champion was gone, replaced by something harder to define, a fighter confronting questions he'd never thought to ask. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kenji Tanaka's voice broke the moment, thick with emotion. "We've just witnessed not a fight, but a lesson. A glimpse of what martial arts has always been beneath the spectacle discipline, overcoming ego fundamentals. Defeating flash tradition, proving its worth in the most direct way possible. As Chuck descended the steps, Master Juan approached, him bowing deeply. The two masters exchanged quiet words, inaudible to the crowd. Jinho watched them, something like longing flickering across his face, a recognition of a world he'd dismissed too quickly, a depth he'd sacrificed for fame. The cameras caught it all, not just the exhibition, but the aftermath, the humbling, the awakening. And as Chuck Norris made his way toward the exit, moving with the same quiet dignity with which he'd arrived, the legend grew before everyone's eyes, not because he'd defeated a younger champion, but because he'd reminded everyone what a true master looks like. This is a disaster. The event director paced the small office behind the arena, running his hands through his hair. An unsanctioned match with an 85-year-old man. The insurance company will have a heart attack. Mina stood by the door, arms crossed. It was an exhibition. 5 minutes light contact. No one got hurt. That's not the point. The director jabbed a finger at the tablet on his desk where social media feeds scrolled with explosive reactions. Do you have any idea what just happened out there? Your fighter, your undefeated, marketable star just got schooled by a man old. enough to be his grandfather on camera in front of millions. Jinho sat silently in the corner, towel draped around his neck, staring at the floor. The cocky grin was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar on his face introspection. The director wasn't finished. This was supposed to be a celebration of martial arts heritage, not whatever that was. He turned to Jinho. "Why would you call out? Chuck Norris?" "Of all people. What were you thinking?" Jinho didn't answer. The question seemed to be directed more at the universe than at him. Anyway, a knock on the door interrupted the tirade. Master Huan entered without waiting for a response, his weathered face solemn. "The crowd is waiting," he said simply. The director threw up his hands. "Waiting for what? The exhibition is over. The schedule is in shambles. We should just—" "They're waiting," Master Huan continued as if the director hadn't spoken. "For the challenge." Jinho looked up. "What challenge?" Master Huan's eyes fixed on his former student. "The one you started. The one that is not finished." Mina stepped forward. "Master Huan, with all due respect, I think we've had enough excitement for one night. Jinho needs to complete what he began," Astaran said, his voice gentle but firm. A challenge was issued. A response was given, but there was no resolution. The director looked like he might explode. "Absolutely not. I forbid any further." "It's not your decision," Master Huan interrupted, still looking at Jinho, "nor mine, nor hers." He nodded toward Mina. "It belongs to the one who issued the challenge." All eyes turned to Jinho. He stood slowly, something shifting in his demeanor. The swagger was gone, but so was the shock. In its place was something new, a quiet determination. "Where is he?" Jinho asked. "Preparing?" Master Huan replied. "He awaits your decision." Jinho took a deep breath. "This isn't just an exhibition anymore, is it?" Master Huan's expression softened slightly. "It never was, Jinho. You challenged more than a man. You challenged a tradition, a philosophy, a way of life. Chuck Norris simply became its embodiment." Jinho nodded slowly. "I need to talk to him." "Shinho, wait," Mina interjected. "Think about what you're doing. Your brand, your sponsors, aren't as important as my honor," Jinho finished. The words sounded strange in his mouth, foreign after years of prioritizing image over substance. "I need to finish this the right way." The director threw up his hands. "I'm calling security." "You won't," Master Han said calmly, "because what happens next will make your exhibition the most talked-about martial arts event in decades." The director hesitated, commercial instinct wearing with caution. Jinho was all ready, moving toward the door. "Where is he?" Master Huan gestured for Jinho to follow. Mina moved to join them, but Master Huan shook his head slightly. "Just him," he said quietly. She paused, then retreated, recognizing this was one Jinho had to see through on his own. Master Huan took Jinho through the rear of the arena, out, from under the cameras and crowd. Neither of them spoke as they moved, the tension thick with unvoiced questions and conclusions. They reached a plain door labeled Preparation Room 3. Master Huan nodded once, then moved to one side. Jinho paused. "Hand on the doorknob. What do I tell him?" Master Huan's eyes softened. The truth, perhaps for once. Jinho swallowed hard and then opened the door. The room was Spartan, a bench, a water cooler, bare walls. Chuck Norris sat by himself, eyes closed in peaceful meditation. He wore a plain white chi now, traditional and plain except for the worn black belt encircling his waist. His fingers lay lightly on his knees, his posture even in rest. He blinked open his eyes as Jinho came in, his face neither friendly nor unfriendly, just there. Jinho hovered awkwardly in the doorway. All that media training and carefully built charm now pointless. "Mr. Norris," he started and trailed off. He didn't know what to say. Chuck held his breath, allowing him to gather his thoughts. Ginho tried again. What occurred out there was a start. Chuck spoke quietly, not an end. Ginho regarded him with surprise. You're not upset with me over what I told you. The challenge. Upset is a decision, Chuck responded simply. I decided to react, not respond. The difference remained between them, deep in its simplicity. Chinho let out a breath. I want to complete this on my own. Chuck watched him for a long moment, his eyes piercing but not ungentle. Why? The one-word question reached to the heart of the matter. Jinho caught himself responding truthfully without the planning normally directing his public utterances. Because I was wrong, he replied softly. And I have to accept that, not only to you but to myself, to all those people out there watching. Chuck nodded once, accepting the response. A genuine fight, then? Chinho's eyes opened a little. Really? Do you mean full contact? But you know my age? Yes. The edge of Chuck's mouth curled up a little. The question is whether you know yours. The soft jab cut more deeply than any physical punch could have. Jinho realized abruptly that age was more than mere years physically. It was maturity, wisdom, perspective. Things he had boasted without having them at all. A real fight, Gino acquiesced quietly. Whatever transpires, Chuck stood up from the bench of awe with the same smooth ease he'd exhibited in the ring. Then by all means, let us not delay. Walking back towards the arena, Chinho discovered himself keeping pace with Chuck's, not necessarily, out of necessity, but out of respect born. The passageways rang with a far-off bellow of the crowd, rising louder with every step. They're hungry for blood. Gino spoke softly. For you to embarrass me. Chuck looked at him, face contemplative. Is that what you assume this is about? Jinho hadn't replied before they approached the gate of the central arena. The roars of the crowds battered them like something tangible. Their faces were shown side by side on the huge screens, the young hero and the aging legend. Another wave of excitement through the crowds. Kenji Tanaka spoke loud and clear over the din. Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we're about to see something truly historic. Jinho Park and Chuck Norris have stepped back onto the arena floor. Mina hurried to meet them, eyes wide with alarm. Jinho, what are you doing? Jinho looked at her steadily. The proper thing once. Close to the ring, officials conferenced frantically. The event director waved his hands wildly, torn between fear and the undeniable chance in front of him. Master Huan stood close by, unruffled amidst chaos, gazing at Jinho with inscrutable lies. When Jinho and Chuck drew near the ring, the crowd dropped into a still hush. Phones raised higher, catching every detail of what was fast becoming martial arts legend. Jinho ascended the stairs first, holding the ropes aside for Chuck. A small show of respect that didn't escape the cameras or commentators. A fascinating shift in attitude from the champion. Kenji watched, voice lowered with expectation. The arrogance that we witnessed before now appears to have given way to something ... else. Within the ring, Chinho walked into the center of the ring, expecting Chuck to follow him. When the older man stood before him, Chinho did something that left the arena in total silence. He bowed heaply, formally in perfect traditional form, the way Master Vaughn had trained him years before fame had altered his priorities. With a moment's hesitation, Chuck reciprocated the bow with equal respect. When they stood up, Jinho turned to the crowd, raising his hands for silence. He was handed the microphone, and for once he took his time weighing his words. Before I spoke, earlier this evening, he started, voice even. I challenged the old martial arts. I ridiculed the ancient ways and masters who held them sacred, and in particular, he looked at Chuck. ... A legend who had been deserving of better respect. A murmur spread through the audience, surprise at humility from a fighter who was accustomed to his brash confidence. I provided an exhibition, Gino went on. Master Norris taught me a lesson instead. A rueful smile played upon his lips. Now I'm requesting a real match. Not for cameras, not for Facebook, but for honor. To determine if I can apply what I've already started learning. He extended the microphone to Chuck, who accepted it with a slight inclination of his head. Martial arts, Chuck spoke, his tone low but resonating to the farthest reaches of the subdued arena. Has never been about age or strength or who can shout the loudest. His eyes scanned the crowd. It's about discipline, respect, ongoing improvement, willingness to admit when you're wrong and learn from it. He returned the microphone to the announcer and turned to confront Jinho. No more words were necessary. The timekeeper emerged nervously. How many rounds? What rules? Chuck glanced at Jinho, addressing the younger fighter. 1 round, Jinho stated, firmly. 5 minutes. Full contact, traditional rules. A wave of shock rippled through the officials. Full contact with a 6-decade-older opponent. It seemed unthinkable. Master Vaughn emerged. I will referee, he said, his voice leaving no room. For argument, this is no longer your event. This is about martial arts itself. The director had his mouth open to protest, then shut it, sensing the pointlessness. As the officials left the ring, Mina grasped Jinho's arm. Are you sure about this? She said softly. Jinho glanced at Chuck, who stood in his corner with eyes shut, lost in a moment's contemplation. No, he acknowledged, but I'm certain it's needed. Master Juan took position in the center of the ring, beckoning both fighters forward. This match, he announced, voice carrying without need of amplification, will follow traditional rules. Victory by knockout, submission or decision after 5 minutes. Honor above all else. He looked between them, his gaze lingering on Jinho. Are you ready? Both men nodded. Begin. The crowd held its collective breath as the fighters settled into their stances. Jinho was noticeably different now, tighter, more disciplined, echoing the traditional Taekwondo he'd learned before adapting his style for spectacle. Chuck's stance was classic, economical, perfect, the culmination of decades of refinement. For several heartbeats, neither moved. They circled slowly, eyes locked, reading each other's intentions. Jinho struck first a fast but controlled jab, testing Chuck's defense. The older man parried smoothly, countering with a quick strike that Jinho barely blocked. Unlike the exhibition, there was no hesitation now, no uncertainty. Both men committed fully to each movement, each technique executed with purpose and precision. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the fight unfolded. This was not the flashy spectacle of Jinho's earlier victory, nor was it the one-sided lesson of the exhibition. This was martial arts in its purest form. 2 fighters testing each other's skill, responding and adapting moment by moment. Extraordinary. Kenji breathed into his microphone. What we're seeing transcends the age gap. Chuck Norris is moving with the timing and precision that made him a 6-time world champion, while Jinho Park seems to have rediscovered the foundations of his art. Jinho pressed forward with a combination jab, cross, turning kick, each movement sharp and focused. Chuck defended with minimal movement, then countered with a sequence of his own, forcing Jinho to retreat momentarily. The younger fighter's face showed intense concentration. No smirk, no playing to the crowd, just total immersion in the moment. Each exchange taught him something new. Each counter forced him to adapt. 2 minutes in, the pace intensified. Jinho launched a powerful roundhouse kick. Chuck blocked it firmly, the impact echoing through the arena. For the first time, there was real power behind their exchanges, not meant to harm, but to test. Jinho found himself pushed in ways he hadn't been in years, not just physically, but mentally. Chuck's techniques weren't flashy, but they were executed with such perfect timing and placement that avoiding them required absolute focus. 3 minutes. Both fighters showed signs of exertion. Now Jinho's breathing heavier, Chuck's movement slightly. Less fluid, but neither gave ground, neither held back. In the crowd, phones remained raised, but many spectators had stopped actively recording, too engrossed in the moment to worry about capturing it. They were witnessing something rare, a fight that had transcended competition to become something. Closer to Art. 4 minutes. Jingho saw an opening and struck with a lightning-fast combination. One punch slipped through Chuck's guard, landing solidly on his shoulder. The crowd gasped, but Chuck simply nodded in acknowledgement and responded with a counter that caught Jingho on the forearm. No showboating from either ran, no celebration of landed strikes, just mutual respect and immediate refocus. In the final minute, something shifted. The fight became less about who could hit whom and more about the exchange itself, the conversation of combat that masters had understood for centuries. When the bell rang, neither fighter had dominated, neither had been defeated. Both stood, breathing hard, facing each other with newfound understanding. Master Huan stepped between them, looking from one to the other. Then, instead of raising either man's hand, he stepped back and bowed deeply to both. The message was clear. This match had no winner or loser. It had a higher purpose. Jingho and Chuck bowed to each other, then turned together to bow to the audience. The crowd erupted in applause, not the frenzied cheering of spectacle, but the deeper appreciation of witnessing something authentic and meaningful. Chuck approached Jingho, extending his hand. Jingho took it, and Chuck leaned in to speak words, meant only for him, inaudible to the cameras and microphones. Whatever he said made Jingho's eyes widen slightly, then soften with understanding. He nodded once, grip tightening briefly before they parted. As Chuck made his way to the edge of the ring, the crowd parted before him, many bowing respectfully as he passed. He acknowledged them with small nods, but didn't linger, moving with the same quiet purpose that had characterized his unexpected appearance. Jingho remained in the center of the ring, watching him go. The transformation in his demeanor was evident. To everyone watching, the cocky showman replaced by a fighter, confronting deeper truths about himself and his art. Mina approached the ring expression a mixture of concern and amazement. "Are you okay? Are you?" she asked softly. Jingho shook his head slowly. "I think?" He hesitated, looking for the right words. "I think I'm all right." Master Huan appeared at his side, face stern, but eyes softened with something like pride. "You remembered?" he said simply. Jingho at his former teacher's gaze. "Not everything, but enough to know how much I've forgotten." The old master nodded once. A good beginning. As they exited the ring together, Kenji Tanaka's voice rose above the continuing applause, thick with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen, we came here tonight expecting to see a showcase of martial arts techniques. Instead, we witnessed the very essence of martial arts itself. The journey from arrogance to humility, from spectacle to substance, from fighting to understanding." Jingho heard the words, felt their truth resonate within him. The path forward suddenly seemed both daunting and clearer return to foundations. A rediscovery of what had drawn him to martial arts in the first place, before fame had distorted his vision. As he followed Master Huan toward the exit, he glanced back once at the now empty ring. Something profound had happened there tonight. Not just a fight, but a transformation. The real challenge, he realized, was only beginning. The morning after the Global Combat Expo dawned clear and cool over Seoul, Chinho Park stood outside Master Han's dojang, hesitating before the simple wooden door. The building was nothing like his sleek, modern training center. No mirrors covering every wall, no camera setups for social media, no sponsor logos, just warm wooden floors, faded calligraphy scrolls, and decades of dedication embedded in every surface. Shinho checked his phone one last time before entering. The notifications had become overwhelming, thousands of messages. Calls from every sports network, his social media followers increasing by the minute. The headlines told the story. Humbling of a champion. Jinho Park faces reality check from martial arts legend Viral Showdown. Young star learns painful lesson from Chuck Norris. When arrogance meets wisdom, the fight that changed Jinho Park. He winced, turning off the device and slipping it into his bag. Mina had advised against coming here, had practically begged him to focus on damage control, to spin the narrative, to protect his brand. But something more powerful than career concerns had drawn him to this quiet corner of the city. Taking a deep breath, he slid open the door and stepped inside. The dojang was already active despite the early hour. A dozen students moved through basic forms with careful precision. Mostly adults, serious practitioners, rather than casual hobbyists. Master Huan directed their movements with occasional short commands. Jinho stood silently by the entrance, suddenly feeling like an intruder in the place where his journey had begun 15 years ago. Master Huan noticed him immediately, but made no acknowledgement, continuing to guide his students. Jinho understood the message. No special treatment, no disruption for the celebrity in their midst. He removed his shoes, bowed toward the flags and certificates adorning the front wall, and took a place at the back of the room. Without being told, he began moving through the same basic form as the others. Tok Iljang, the first pattern taught to beginners. His body remembered the movements, though it had been years since he'd practiced them with any seriousness. In his professional training, he'd focused on flashier, more athletic techniques that impressed judges and audiences. B's fundamental patterns had seemed boring, outdated, now attempting to execute them perfectly alongside dedicated students. He found himself struggling to maintain the proper tension, exact angles, the perfect balance that Master Han demanded. Practice continued for an hour. No acknowledgement of Jinho's presence, no special attention, just the shared discipline of traditional training. By the end, his shirt was soaked with sweat, his legs trembling slightly from holding stances longer and lower than he was accustomed to. As the regular students bowed and dispersed, Master Huan finally approached him. "You came," the old teacher said simply. Jinho bowed deeper than necessary. "I needed to." Master Huan regarded him for a long time, eyes piercing under thick brows. "Why?" The question was brief but deep. Jinho had prepared numerous explanations on the ride over, but standing before his previous master, only the truth felt right. "Because last night made me realize I'd been winning battles and losing myself," he replied softly. Master Huan's face stood firm, but something melted at the corners of his eyes. "And you think going back to fundamentals will enable you to recapture it?" "I don't know," Jinho confessed. "But after our bout, Chuck Norris spoke to me. He told me, real victory is not conquering others. It's conquering yourself. I think I'm only just beginning to realize what that's all about. Chuck Norris is wise, but it's not just about knowing with your head. Your body has to learn it, too." He motioned to the vacant dojang. "Are you ready to make that journey?" "I am," Jinho answered defiantly. Master Huan's eyes narrowed. "Even if it means putting aside your fame, your sponsors, your social media profile." Jinho paused. The truth of what he was being asked finally sinking in. His whole career, his identity in the public eye, his wealth, all were predicated on the flash camera-ready version of himself that Master Huan was asking him to put aside. Before he could respond, the dojang door slid open. Menina stood there, slightly winded, as though she'd been looking for him. "Jinho, there you are. We have 6 interview requests. Your primary sponsor wishes to meet this afternoon, and she ceased taking in the vista before her. What are you doing here?" Jinho glanced from Mina to Master Huan back again, weighing the choice before him, trying to recall who I was before all that was important. He said softly, "Minus," expression softened with understanding. She stepped inside, owing respectfully. To Master Juan. I'm sorry for interrupting, Master, but the world is exploding over what happened last night. We need to respond. Master Juan regarded her thoughtfully. The world will wait. True learning will not. Chin-ho looked between them, his past and his present, tradition and commerce, substance and image. The choice seemed impossible. Can't there be a middle path? He asked finally. Master War raised an eyebrow. What do you propose? Chin-ho took a deep breath. I won't abandon my career or my commitments, but I will train here again to relearn what I've forgotten to find balance. Master Juan considered this for a long moment. It will not be easy. I will show no favoritism. You will begin again as a beginner in many ways. I understand, Jin-ho said, and your public persona, the arrogance, the disrespect for tradition. Jin-ho glanced at Mina, who watched him with newfound respect despite her professional concerns. That changes today, he said firmly. I can be successful without dishonoring what martial arts truly means. Master Juan nodded slowly. Then we begin, now. He turned to Mina. You may schedule his interviews and meetings after training hours. Here he is not a champion. He is a student once more. Mina hesitated, then nodded. I'll make it work. She gave Jin-ho a small smile. This could actually be good. A redemption story. The humbled champion returning to his roots. Jin-ho shook his head. That's still thinking about image. I need to focus on reality for a while. Master Juan watched this exchange with quiet approval. Your first lesson has already begun. Now let us continue with the second. For the next 3 hours, Ching-ho trained under Master W's exacting guidance. No cameras, no audience, just the bare fundamentals of traditional Taekwondo. Basic stances held until his legs shook, simple punches repeated hundreds of times, patterns executed with an emphasis on perfect technique rather than speed or power. By midday, every muscle in Chin-ho's body ached. He had always considered himself in peak physical condition, but this training targeted weaknesses he hadn't realized. Existed small stabilizing muscles neglected in his focus on explosive movements, for competition. As they paused for a brief rest, Master Juan watched him with assessing eyes. You have not lost your talent, but you have lost your foundation, like a house built on sand, impressive, but unstable. A knock at the dojan door interrupted them. Mina entered, followed by a familiar figure that made both Jing-ho and Master Juan straighten in surprise. Kenji Tanaka, the commentator from the previous night's event, bowed deeply as he entered. Forgive the intrusion, Henji said. I hope to speak with Jin-ho, but I see training is in progress. Master Juan returned the bow with equal respect. Kenji Tanaka, your reputation precedes you. Jin-ho looked between them, surprised. You know each other? Not personally, Master Juan replied, but any serious martial artist knows of Kenji, Tanaka's contributions to preserving traditional martial arts history. Jin-ho watched this exchange with growing realization. Kenji wasn't just a commentator, he was part of the martial arts world Chino had dismissed as outdated and irrelevant. Why are you here? Chino asked directly. Kenji turned to him, expression serious. Because what happened last night matters beyond one event or one fighter's career. It represents something important about martial arts in our modern era, a good reminder that the old ways still have value. Jin-ho suggested a hint of his old defensiveness returning. Kenji shook his head. No. A reminder that martial arts has always been about evolution than adaptation, but never at the expense of its core principles. Master Juan nodded in agreement. Well said. Mina stepped forward. Mr. Tanaka has a proposal. One I think you should consider. Kenji bowed slightly to Jin-ho. I'm documenting the history of traditional martial arts in the modern era. The tensions between commercialization and tradition, between sport and self-defense, between showmanship and substance. And you want to include what happened with Chuck Norris, Gino guessed. I want to include what happens next. Kenji corrected. Your journey forward from this moment, not as a media spectacle, but as an honest documentation of rediscovery. Jing-ho frowned slightly. You want to film my training? Occasionally, unobtrusively, with Master Wan's permission, of course. Kenji gestured around the simple dojang. No camera crews, no production teams, just honest observation of a genuine process. Jinho looked to Master Huan, expecting rejection of anything that might disrupt the traditional training environment. To his surprise, the old teacher seemed to be considering the proposal. The world saw your challenge, Master Huan said finally. Perhaps they should also see your response to it. Jinho blinked in surprise. You'd allow this. With conditions, Master, Huan stipulated. Training comes first, documentation second, and nothing that dishonors the spirit of what we do here. Kenji bowed again. I would expect nothing less. Jingho felt a strange mix of emotions, uncertainty about having his struggle documented, but also a sense that this might be part of making amends for his public disrespect of traditional martial arts. There's something else, Mina added quietly. Chuck Norris has agreed to be interviewed for the project. Jinho's head snapped up. He has? Kenji nodded briefly. He rarely gives interviews anymore, but he feels this story has value beyond the spectacle. A long silence followed as Gino absorbed this information. The man he had mockingly challenged, who had responded with dignity and skill rather than anger, was willing to contribute to documenting the aftermath. When do we start? Jinho asked finally. We already have, Kenji replied, gesturing to the simple phone camera Mina had discreetly set up in the corner of the room. Jingho looked to Master Huan, who nodded once in approval. And let's continue, the old teacher said firmly. Jinho, return to your forms. Beginners always struggle with fundamentals, and you have become a beginner again in many ways. Without hesitation, Ginho took his position in the center of the dojang, bowing to Master Huan before settling into the first stance of Taguchil Jang. As he moved through the pattern, he was acutely aware of the camera, capturing his efforts, not the carefully curated content he usually produced for his millions of followers, but an honest documentation of his struggle to reconnect with the foundations he had abandoned. It felt strangely liberating. 3 weeks after the global combat, Expo Gino stood backstage at the Asian Martial Arts Championship. The crowd's roar filtered through the walls familiar. Yet, his internal landscape had shifted dramatically. Mina approached with clipboard. In hand, the organizers want to know if you're still using your entrance music and effects. No, just announce my name. Nothing else. She studied him carefully. You're sure? Your brand has always been about spectacle. Then it's time to change expectations, Shino replied simply. The past weeks had transformed him. Training with Master Huan had intensified, focusing relentlessly on fundamentals. His body moved differently, now more grounded, more centered, less concerned with appearance, and more with effectiveness. His public persona had evolved, too. The brash, trash-talking champion had been replaced by a more thoughtful presence. He spoke honestly about his journey, neither exaggerating his progress nor minimizing his previous misconceptions. Not everyone approved. His main sponsor expressed concern about his less marketable image. Social media influencers complained he had gone soft. Even some fans seemed disappointed by the absence of the arrogant showman they had expected. But others, particularly serious martial artists, had responded with respect. Applications to master Huan's dojang had tripled. Kenji's documentary project had attracted attention from major streaming platforms. Beneath the noise, Jinho had found a quiet certainty that he was finally on the right path. You're up in 5 minutes, Mina reminded him. Your opponent has been talking trash all week. Says you're afraid to face him now that Chuck Norris exposed you. Jinho nodded, unsurprised. Tishi Yamamoto was known for psychological warfare as much. as fighting skill. 3 months ago, Jinho would have responded in kind, escalating the verbal battle. Now he simply continued his warm-up, focusing on his breathing and intention. "Aren't you going to respond?" Mina pressed. Jinho smiled slightly. In the ring, the only place it matters. When his name was announced, Shinho walked out without fanfare. No elaborate entrance, no posturing, just focused purpose. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered, others murmured in confusion at the absence of theatrics. Across the ring, Takashi played to the audience with exaggerated confidence, pointing at Shinho and making throat-slitting gestures. "Your time is over!" he shouted. "Chuck Norris broke you!" Jinho met his gaze calmly, then bowed deeper and more sincere than the perfunctor nod he would have offered previously. The gesture seemed to unnerve Tishi more than any trash talk could have. His showboating intensified as if trying to compensate for Jinho's unexpected composure. When the bell rang, Tishi charged forward with explosive aggression, launching a flying kick clearly designed for spectacle. 3 weeks ago, Jinho might have responded with equally flashy counter, turning the exchange into a highlight reel moment. Instead, he stepped offline with economic movement, letting Tishi's momentum carry him past and delivered a clean technical counter that sent his opponents stumbling. The pattern continued throughout the first round. Tishi attacked with increasingly wild combinations, growing visibly frustrated as Jinho responded with precise techniques that emphasized fundamental principles rather than flash. Something has definitely changed in Jinho Park's approach. One commentator observed, "We're seeing fewer spectacular techniques, but his overall effectiveness seems enhanced by this more disciplined style." Between rounds, Master Huan offered minimal instruction. "You remember," the old teacher said simply. Jinho nodded. "Not everything, yet, but enough. Your opponent grows desperate. He expected the fighter you were, not the fighter you are becoming." In the second round, Tishi abandoned all pretense of strategy, charging forward with pure aggression. For a moment, his furious onslaught drove Jinho to the edge of the ring. The crowd roared, sensing a potential upset. Jinho felt a familiar temptation, the urge to respond with equally aggressive counterattacks, to reassert dominance through overwhelming force. The old pattern called to him, promising the rush of domination, the roar of the crowd, the validation of his ego. Instead, he breathed deeply, centering himself as Master Huan had taught him. When Tishi launched another wild combination, Jinho saw not just the individual techniques, but the pattern beneath them, the emotional desperation driving them. He responded not with matched aggression, but with perfect timing. A simple counter that caught Tishi mid-movement, using his own momentum against him. The impact wasn't spectacular, wasn't designed for cameras, but it was fundamentally sound, perfectly executed, and devastatingly effective. Tishi stumbled, momentarily stunned. Before he could recover, Shinho followed with a combination knot. Flashy kicks, but a technically perfect sequence that flowed from stance to strike with unbroken power. The final blow landed clean. Tishi dropped to the mat. The referee rushed in, checking the fallen fighter before waving off the match. Victory by knockout, the outcome many had predicted, but achieved in a manner few had expected. Jinho didn't celebrate with theatrics. No leaping, onto ropes, no taunting gestures. He simply bowed to his opponent, to the referee, to the four corners of the ring as tradition dictated. As medical staff attended to Tishi, Shingo approached and knelt beside him, offering a hand as consciousness returned. The gesture simple. Human respect rather than competitive posturing seemed to surprise Tishi more than the knockout itself. In the post-fight interview, questions focused less on the victory and more on Jinho's transformed approach. "We've seen a very different Jinho Park tonight," the interviewer observed. "Less flash, more substance. Is this a direct result of your encounter with Chuck Norris? Jingho considered carefully. That moment was a catalyst, but the change was necessary regardless. I had lost sight of what martial arts truly means, the balance between effectiveness and respect, between innovation and tradition. Some fans miss the old Jinho Park, the interviewer pressed. The showman, the trash talker. What would you say to them? Jinho smiled slightly. Entertainment has its place, but it can't replace substance. I'm still developing as a fighter and as a person. I hope they'll stay for the journey, but I understand if some prefer the show to the reality. As he left the ring, a small group awaited him. Backstage Master Juan Mina and Kenji, whose documentary cameras had captured everything. Impressive, Kenji said simply. Not just the victory, but how you achieved it. Master Juan nodded in agreement. You fought with both mind and body tonight. Progress. Mina's reaction was more measured. The sponsors will have mixed feelings, but I think we can reshape your brand around this new direction. Authenticity is marketable too in its way. Jingho nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. The fighter who had mockingly challenged tradition had been humbled not through defeat, but through revelation. His pride had collapsed not into shame, but into something stronger, genuine confidence built on substance rather than spectacle. 6 months after the Global Combat Expo, the Seoul International Convention Center buzzed. With anticipation, the annual Masters demonstration, traditionally a quiet affair, had sold out for the first time in 30 years. Posters outside told the story. Traditional meets modern. Master Juan and world champion Jinho Park demonstrate the evolution. Of Taekwondo backstage, Jinho adjusted his traditional dobuk, the simple white uniform unmarred by sponsor logos or custom designs. Nothing to distinguish him from any other practitioner. Nervous? Mina asked, approaching with the evenings. Schedule? Jinho shook his head. Not nervous, just focused. The past 6 months had transformed him. His public image had evolved from social media spectacle to substantive content about martial arts history and principles. He'd lost some casual fans but gained respect from serious practitioners worldwide. Financially, the transition had been challenging. His original sponsor had dropped him, uncomfortable with his less provocative persona. But other opportunities emerged, companies more interested in authenticity than controversy. Most significantly, his relationship with Master Juan had deepened, from teacher-student to something closer to partnership with Jinho, helping bring traditional methods to a wider audience while continuing his own development. It's time, Master, Juan announced, approaching with measured steps. At 73, his movements remained precise. Control a living embodiment of the principles he had taught for decades. Jinho bowed. I'm ready, Master. As they waited for their introduction, Kenji Tanaka approached, camera in hand, documenting the final chapter of what had become an unexpectedly powerful story. The episode airs next week, Kenji informed them. The streaming service is calling it their most anticipated documentary. Release of the year. Have you heard from him? Jingho asked, not needing to specify who. Chuck sends his regrets that he couldn't attend in person, but he'll be watching the live stream. The announcer's voice echoed through the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Master Sum Min Hwan and world champion Jinho Park, demonstrating the bridge between tradition and innovation in Taekwondo. What followed wasn't the flashy performance many might have expected from a world champion. Instead, Jingho and Master Juan demonstrated fundamental forms of traditional Taekwondo, first separately, then in perfect synchronization, their movements, expressing the same principles across the generational divide. They progressed into applications showing how seemingly simple movements contained within basic forms could be applied in practical self-defense. Jingho's athletic abilities were still evident, but now they served the techniques rather than overshadowing them. What you are witnessing, the announcer explained, is not just physical technique, but the philosophy of Taekwondo expressed through movement, the harmony of mind and body, the balance of power and control, the integration of tradition and innovation. For the final segment, Master Juan stepped aside, allowing Gino to demonstrate how these principles could be adapted for modern competitive fighting without losing their essential character. The transitions were seamless from traditional form to practical application to competition-ready technique, all flowing from the same foundational principles. When they finished with a synchronized bow, the response was overwhelming, out wild, cheering with the deeper appreciation of witnesses to something authentic and meaningful. During the question and answer session that followed, a young practitioner raised his hand. "Jingho, 6 months ago, you were known for saying traditional martial arts were outdated and ineffective. What would you say to that version of yourself?" Now the hall fell silent. Jinho took a breath, considering carefully. "I would tell him that he was confusing flash for substance," Gino answered honestly. "That the techniques that look most impressive on camera aren't always the most effective. That innovation without foundation is in progress. It's just novelty." He glanced at Master Juan, then continued. "Most importantly, I'd tell him that martial arts isn't just about fighting techniques. It's about developing character, discipline, humility, respect. The physical skills are just the beginning." Another hand raised an older practitioner with the bearing of someone who had spent decades in training. "How do you see the future relationship between traditional martial arts and modern competition? Can they truly coexist?" Master Juan spoke first. "Tradition without evolution becomes stagnant. Evolution without tradition lacks foundation. The future lies not in choosing between them, but in understanding their proper relationship. Tradition as the root, evolution as the branches." Jinho nodded. "For years, I thought I had to choose. Either embrace tradition and seem outdated or reject it entirely to be modern. What I've learned is that true innovation comes not from abandoning foundations, but from understanding them deeply, enough to build upon them authentically." After the session, a staff member approached Jinho. "There's someone who wishes to speak with you privately." In a quiet office, Jinho found himself looking at Chuck Norris on a video call. "Impressive demonstration," Chuck said, his expression warm but measured. Jinho bowed slightly. "Thank you, sir. I'm still learning." "Always," Chuck agreed. "That never stops." He paused. "You've changed since we met in every way." Jinho acknowledged that night changed my perspective completely. Chuck shook his head slightly. "I was just the catalyst. The potential for change was already within you. The recognition that something was missing. The hunger for deeper understanding. I simply created a moment where you couldn't ignore that anymore. Still, I owe you my gratitude." "Pay it forward," Chuck suggested. "There are other young fighters making the same mistakes you did, choosing spectacle over substance, immediate gratification over long-term development. I'm trying, not everyone, to hear it." Chuck smiled slightly. "They don't need to hear it. They need to see it in your actions, your character, your continued growth. Words convince temporarily. Example transforms permanently." As the call concluded, Ching Ho felt a sense of completion, not of his development as a martial artist, which he now understood was lifelong, but of the particular chapter that had begun with his arrogant challenge. Returning to the main hall, he found Master Juan waiting patiently. A successful demonstration, the old teacher noted, but more importantly, a truthful one. "Where do we go from here?" Jinho asked. Master Juan's eyes crinkled slightly. "Forward. Always forward. Tomorrow. We return to basics as we do every day. The forms, the stances, the principles, they are not steps to be completed, but a path to be walked continuously." Outside the convention, center night had fallen over Seoul. Master John stood beside Jingho, both men content in the silence that only those who truly understand each other can share. The journey that had begun with an arrogant challenge had led to something neither could have predicted. Not just redemption, but renaissance, a reconnection with principles that transcended generations, styles, and cultures. Tomorrow, Master, Juan said finally, we begin again. Chinho nodded, embracing the paradox at the heart of martial arts mastery, that the end of one lesson is always the beginning of the next, that the master remains eternally a student, that humility opens doors that pride keeps firmly shut. I'm ready, he said, and this time, he truly was. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.